Welcome to Mission Revive, a podcast dedicated to hope and healing through God's transforming love, where your hosts, anchored in truth and armed with faith, are changing the world and reviving hearts with Jesus, one conversation at a time.
Hi, welcome to this episode of the Mission Revive podcast. I'm Bob Newberry, and I'm a board member of Revive Hope and Healing Ministries, a collection of Catholic apostolates impelled by the Holy Spirit. My partner for today's podcast is Costa, founder and executive director of Revive Hope and Healing Ministries. Good morning, Ann.
Hi, Bob. It's really good to be back together again.
Yep.
Yeah, for this podcast.
Yes.
And I know this one is very near and dear to your heart. It's close connection with your own home parish, but we're going to be talking to Mark and Nina Ranieri, who are the youth minister, or at least Mark is the youth minister. But I love that they're both here as a couple.
Yeah.
To talk about their experiences and raising their family. So I'm going to just give you a little bio that they provided for us. They've been married since 2009. They have 6 living children and 3 children in heaven. And their family currently resides in Marcy, New York, in upstate New York. And Mark currently works as the youth minister for a Spirit of Hope Catholic community based in Oneida, which I think you're involved with, right? One of the parishes or some.
Yep.
Previously, Mark served as a school building administrator for the new Hartford and Oriskany school districts, as well as a teacher for the Rome City School District. So he has a ton of background there. He has a BA from the SUNY Geneseo. Mark has a master's from LeMoyne College and a master's from SUNY Stony Brook. Nina has a BS from SUNY Geneseo and a master's degree from SUNY Cortland, and she previously taught in the Sauquoit Valley Central School District and also worked for the Syracuse Diocese Family Respect Life Office. Wow, we're really blessed to have them here with us today, that they're able to carve out this time for us. So come on.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello. Welcome.
Good morning, Ann. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. You know, I when I first approached Mark about joining us on this podcast, he said, well, you know, I'm only half of the puzzle here. So quickly extended an invite to Nina as well. And I've got to tell you that what in my own mind, what prompted the invitation and maybe several others going forward is the institution of family and how important that is, and how the church views family, and then in your own day-to-day practical lives, how you approach family, you know, and my first question, and please keep your answer under 2 hours, okay? My first question really is, how has your own Catholic faith, informed or influenced your approach to family? Can we start there?
Sure. I think that being a Catholic is so wrapped up in what it means to be a husband and a father for me personally. I think that everything that we do flows kind of from the Catholic Church to the Catholic Church, and the church is meant to be, in so many ways, a support to families. And we've heard this throughout the years with Pope John Paul II. He would say, as the family goes, so goes the nation, so goes the world. But really, in a personal way, I think being a dad and a husband is strengthened for me by my participation in the life of the church, in the sacraments especially, but also the community of believers, the support that we receive through being part of the church, part of the universal church. That's what sticks out to me.
Yeah, I was thinking of the same exact quote. As the family goes, so goes the nation and the world. And I was also reflecting on Our Lady of Fatima and the children of Fatima, and how, they said the final battle will be between Satan and the family. And you could see that in the world today. And, if we did not, by the grace of God, have our Catholic faith, I don't know how we could do it, So like Mark said, it is the foundation of our family. It's not just an hour on Sunday. It's interwoven into every aspect of our marriage and raising our children. And that's what makes it so beautiful to be a Catholic. It's in you, it's a part of you,
Nina, I'm sorry, Mark, do you want to add to that?
No, this is why I wanted Nina on, because sometimes we can complete each other's thoughts better. So
Okay, well, and we get to watch,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's great, Nina, could you you talk about how it informs on a day-to-day basis, raising the kids, building your family. Could you be more specific about how that plays itself out?
Yes. Every morning when we wake up, even if we can't make it to Mass, we read the Mass readings together at the table. And it started off with just Mark and I reading them, and then the kids kind of gravitate towards that. And when we were talking with our older daughter last night about her faith and how
Could I interrupt for a second? How old is your oldest?
Our oldest is 12 and a half. So
okay, great.
When we were speaking with her last night about her own faith journey, and we said, how do mom and dad help you? And that was the first thing she said, was being present to listen to the word in the morning as a family. So I think if you could start your day with Jesus, it doesn't mean the day's going to be perfect, but it's a good start to the day with the kids. And then throughout the day, we homeschool our youngest ones. Our oldest daughter's at Holy Cross in 7th grade, but the youngest we homeschool. So throughout all of their learning is woven our Catholic faith. So
could you tell us the ages of the other kids?
Yes. So our oldest is 12, and then that's Olivia. And then our son Mark is 11. Juliana is 8. Dominic is 5. Francis is 3. And Salvatore is 1.5.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So the oldest is out of the home attending Holy Cross, and the other kids are home for school.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I got the lay of the land.
Yeah,
now.
you got the lay.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up right now.
Yeah.
Just picture going to the doctor when they say, "What's the birth date of all your children?"
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yes. So I interrupted you.
No,
Nina.
it's
You were
okay.
gonna-
It's okay. But I guess, our faith being interwoven. So when we're learning, and let's say we're learning English, and we have a Catholic English book, or we're learning about the biographies of the saints throughout the day. My phone beeps and we pray the Angelus or the Divine Mercy, and just trying to make our faith be a part of daily life with our children, so that for them it's not abstract. It's not countercultural to be Catholic, because it's a part of who they are. And I would just say all that very humbly, that this process has been very much of a baby step process. We didn't know all this going into parenthood at all. And it's only through God's grace that he shows us bit by bit, how to parent Catholic parenting. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
You want me to keep going, Ann, or do you want to kick
Well,
in
I just
here?
want to make a comment that I think a lot of people do think, I could never do what you're doing. I could never do that. And it's encouraging to hear you say that, well, you didn't start out this way. And it just kind of unfolded. You did probably one thing at a time, and you gained in grace and strength and commitment to that. And that's very encouraging, I think, for young families who sit there and think, I could never do that. Well, you can start very small. You can start with having breakfast in the morning and reading the word. uh, and see that was impactful, and I thank you for saying that.
And I think that's been a theme that's run throughout our marriage, is that one thing at a time, and that the Lord calls you deeper and deeper. And the Lord is, endless in compassion, inexhaustible in his nature. And so just for us, we never even set out on a journey of having a big family. That was not really anything, especially I had ever considered. We both came from smaller families. And it was only through the grace of God that we were put in touch with someone who, through part of our marriage prep, our priest said, you have to take a class through natural family planning. It's required. And we said, okay, it's just part of what you do. And that little crack, that little opening led to us being open to life for our first child. And then we said, each one, I just think that's a good theme to build upon, because we said, could we have one more? Yeah, we could have one more. What about having one more? Do you think we could have one more? Yeah. And slowly, I think it's just this unfolding, and that's also taken part in our own spiritual life. Could we go to confession? Could we not miss mass or not pick and choose when we go to mass? And the Lord just keeps calling you in and in. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so there's never a judgment. It's the Lord calls us deeper day by day, year by year. Even now, who knows what the Lord will be calling us to, next month or this week or next year. I think the Lord just is always saying, could you give me a little more? Could you open your heart a little more to me?
Yeah. My whole spiritual journey started with, well, what if Jesus is really there? What if he's really in the Eucharist? You know what I'm saying? What if, what, that little question that you have, go with that. Don't worry about that. Just go with that little crack. It's actually, that's so beautiful. And how do your kids respond to this? What is it like, with 6 children in the house? How is it going?
It's loud.
It
It's a beautiful chaos, I would say. It's they are their own unique people already at their ages, and they each have their own unique charisms. And we all have our little 3-year-old, and he'll tell me, we're going to pray Hail Mary in his little voice, and when we asked him about what do mom and dad teach you about your faith, and he said that we go to heaven. So we have a whole spectrum of ages and personalities, and I can't say that they always want to sit down and pray the rosary with us as a family. Sometimes they'd rather sit at the couch and watch TV. We have resistance going on, but the beauty of that, I think, what I've learned personally, is when you watch your children and you watch them as a child, you have this beautiful image of your relationship with God as the Father and you as the child. And in those moments when the kids want to resist what's best for them or good for them, you can see how we all do that with God in our own spiritual journeys too. So, Jesus says, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be like a child. And I think oftentimes we believe, as parents, as the older ones, it's all us guiding our children and growing our children, but so often it's them growing us. You know what I mean? And their little ways of catechizing and evangelizing us.
Yes.
As you can see from the color of my hair, I'm really old. Okay. But I find in recent years, certain things that I thought would never be challenged are increasingly challenged. And one of those is the institution of family, what family is, what's the value of family, and so forth. And as I listen to you, a question that pops up is, you interact with the larger world. your kids interact with the larger world and will do so increasingly as they grow older. How do you pull that off? How do you do what you're doing and follow through on the commitments that you've made in raising your family in a certain way, relative to what's going on and swirling around you?
I think that's a great question, Bob, because I think it reflects a shift in our culture. So if this were 70 years ago, 80 years ago, we wouldn't be unique in any way. We would just be maybe a normal size or even a normal to smaller size family. I mean, my grandma was one of 9 plus the babies that they lost and, to heaven. I think bigger families were more of a norm. You think about the Kennedys or even Bobby Kennedy with 10 kids, and he was young and vigorous. And, you think about big families back then as opposed to now. So now a struggle that I've had is once we passed really our 3rd child, people stopped becoming happy for us when we would tell them that we were having a baby, or they became less happy or more reserved, or had a hard time hiding their nonverbal cues of, or I got a lot of comments, especially at work. I would get a lot of comments about sterilization, that off-color jokes that, I know a doctor, you can sterilize yourself, jokes about that. And I would say, no, I'm not going to do that. No. And that was very much a part of the male culture right now in society. There's very much a sterilization push among guys my age. Once you hit 2 to 3 to go and get sterilized. And it's considered to be a other-centered thing in secular culture. Well, you have to do your part as a guy, it's considered. So that's been a struggle for me to kind of push back against that. But
how do you do that, Mark? How do you push back?
I think just with a great humility, because Nina had kind of referenced the humility that the kids bring, that it's not always easy. And there are kind of these illusions or mirages that society will put in front of you, the television ads for contraception kind of make it seem like, oh, if only you could stop this, then you could go to Disney World, or then you could go on your vacation to Bermuda, or whatever you got to do. And Nina and I will just talk about it. I think we rely upon our marriage. And I'll say, I don't care about going to Disney World. That's not really my goal in life. Having another child has brought so much, each one, immeasurable joy to our family. And we say sometimes our family is like a nuclear family right now, whereas the families I referenced in the past would have been extended families. They would have lived in these big apartments or nearby, and everybody would have helped out. Now it's very much a nuclear family. So that's been Nina and I and our big family. But that will change as the kids get older. And I think somebody told me a long time ago, his name's Father Phil Brockmeyer, and I keep meaning to call him and tell him this news. When I was a new youth minister, before I had any kids, I said to him, how can you be open to a big family? And he said, Mark, where there's true love, there's always room for one more. And that just planted this little seed that he probably couldn't have even known, that just flowered for myself and Nina, because that's so true. There's always one more at the dinner table. You think about, there's always one more in our life too, and in our marriage. Nothing's closed off from God. But I think that to directly answer your question, our marriage has, in good communication, constant communication, has really allowed us to weather those things, because those comments we've learned are sometimes made from a place of sadness, because no one ever regrets having one more child. Look at your own children, no matter how many you have, no one would regret having another child. But we do hear from people from time to time that say to us, oh, we wish that we had one more, they'll say. and they'll say it with such sadness. It's really heartbreaking. And so again, with that humility, we just kind of go on and know that we're bringing new souls into heaven someday, even if they're miscarried and go directly to heaven. Those are souls that the Lord is bringing before his throne at one point.
Yeah. Yeah. Nina, you want to take a shot at this question?
Yeah, I was just thinking also about we're called to be in the world, but not of the world. And so sometimes I think when people hear that you homeschool, they might think you're doing it to shelter your children or protect your children from the world. I do think that homeschooling gives them a really good foundation, and you get that time with your children to build them up before you send them out into the world. It's like the house built on sand versus the house built on the rock, and what's going to weather the storm, because they're going out in the world. We live in the world, and they have to be prepared for it. But all that Mark said, they're learning within the family, and that's their protection right now before they're of age to go out into the world. So everything you said, and a lot of grace and humility from God, because it is countercultural. And, sometimes I think you got to have a thick skin, because people comment and it's not always pleasant. But to learn that you don't have to take it personally. And,
could I interrupt for a second?
Yes. Yeah.
The comments are in terms of family size primarily?
Yes. That's primarily what it is. It's about family size or why.
And these sometimes are just stories that are put in people's heads. So for guys who can be more sports oriented, once you go from 2 to 3, I'm sure you guys have heard this. It's, I can't do that, Mark. Nope. That's going from man-to-man defense to a zone defense, because, you're outnumbered by your kids. So, you hear these stories that are put in people's heads, but those are just stories. And that's like a hypothesis almost that they have in their head. And sometimes I wonder, they don't know what to say. They don't have a background to talk about a big family. I never knew what a big family looked like either. So in many ways, Nina and I are just like going on our own frontier and creating our own reality here, because, once you reach a certain point, kids don't fit in a certain car anymore. The cars are built for 2 to 3 kids, and that's it. So you kind of are like, okay, we're just going to have to trust God to, make a way here, because we don't know what to do. And God always makes a way. That it's true that God is never outdone in generosity. So if we open up our hearts to him, because we know that God loves children. We know that Jesus said that in scripture. He loves children. We know that some of the best people in the world love children. And we know that some of the gravest evil in the world is when evil is done against children. So that's why we know that children are so sacred. So we have to push back, especially within the church. We have to push back and say children are a gift. They're not a burden. Just yesterday, I was on a trip. We took the kids paintballing on the north side of Oneida Lake. The teenagers at church, not my own kids. We took the teenagers in high school paintballing. So I'm driving along the north side of Oneida Lake, and there's 2 churches that are closed. And there's 2, which really struck me, elementary schools that are closed.
They're closed.
Big, relatively modern looking elementary schools shuttered. And I saw this in the school system. We would study demographic data. The demographic data was on a downward, there weren't children being born. So whereas in the past in New Hartford or Oriskany, you would have bigger families, for a variety of reasons, that has gone down, and we see it reflective, and there's not enough children to be in the school. So we have to close them and merge them with other schools, or we have to combine into a K through 12 school building. So this is something that we have to say, it's okay. We have to really be a support to families so that they can feel like they can step out in faith and not feel that judgment or condemnation. And that goes in a variety of areas, especially in work too. I think work, a lot of women feel pressure to get back to work, or it's like, oh, I can't afford daycare. And so there's all these pressures too that aren't geared towards supporting a big family as well.
Mark, I'm struck by well, you describe your and Nina's experience has been kind of on the frontier without a whole lot of guidance and so forth. But yet you also cite the one comment from your priest friend that where there's true love, there's always room for one more, which really that's been a significant guiding principle for you. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And so I, on the one hand, I'm and the jokes you reference about going from man to zone and so forth, that seem to suggest some kind of a teaching construct there, and I'm just struck by the importance of examples being provided to young Catholic families that open up other options for them in terms of how they want to realize and their own life as families and parents. And I'm kind of rambling a bit here. But does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So for me as a guy, role modeling is so important. A lot of us men really looked up to our grandfathers because our grandfathers, were that older guy role model. And that's been a void for me, because when I look up one generation to all my uncles, my father, most men that I know in the church, they did not have big families. So I can't image them and say, what did they do? Or what does it look like? How do I hold, it's like a guy, how do I hold the hammer? Or how do I hold the bat? Like the dad or the grandpa, they image it for you.
Correct.
And then they gradually release it back to you. So naturally, and that's where I think having a big family sets your kids up in a way to be open to life themselves, because they're able to image Nina and I, again, with that humility, knowing that we're very imperfect going about it, but they can image us and say, and then gradually released back to them. So whereas
Yes.
I had never held a baby before, because I'm the youngest in my family, I had never held a baby before my oldest.
Yes.
So speaking of, and whereas right now, like all my children are taking turns holding baby, because it's just
Right.
what we do in the family. It's not unusual. They know what to do. They have strategies that kind of run out after a while,
Yep.
at their age and development. But that's such a blessing for them to be able to do that.
Yes.
So Mark,
Yeah.
I'm curious about your work with the teens. I mean, you're imaging for the teens, something that they probably never experienced or thought of themselves. And what is that like? I mean, what questions do they have? What concerns what are you dealing with these teens?
Thank you for asking me that, because that's a therapeutic question for me. And so when I started as a youth minister at Holy Family in Syracuse, large suburban parish, I was right out of college. Father Prior, awesome priest of our diocese, hired me. I had, like I said, never held a baby. I was a different type of a youth minister. And then I came to Utica after we got married, and I did some faith formation / youth ministry work for Father Joe Salerno, another incredible priest. Yeah. And I had a younger family, but they were still tiny, little and not as big of a size of a family. So this is my first go around this summer being a youth minister with a big family, and some of whom are old enough to participate in my events. So that has been humbling for me in some ways, because I will have a baby in my hand sometimes, or I'll be with the kids and I won't be as like effective as I think I want to be. Well, I have to be out there playing football, or I got to be hands-on, or I'm not doing this or doing that. And somebody, one of our employees within Spirit of Hope said to me, which was really profound, and just supportive. She said, but they're seeing you as a dad. And so they're seeing your fatherhood in a different way. And we're also blessed in Spirit of Hope to have two young priests who are full of zeal and energy and just are shot out of a cannon in such a great way. So sometimes we can like pass the buck between each other, and I can take on more of a supportive role. But it has been challenging, and I've had to kind of adjust my perspective in youth ministry. But I know too that it's important for, like you said, me to remind myself that, especially if they don't have those role models in their own life, for the teens to be able to see what a father looks like, what a father does. And some of their fathers might be at work all day and they might not see that. How many of our dads worked really long hours?
Sure.
So in a strange way, the youth minister can kind of image that, while the father might be, even just for a few hours someplace else or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Anytime we can strengthen that role of father, I think in our society right now, we've got to do it, because it's just been decimated, really.
Yes, it's
so-
huge. Yeah.
And like you said, Nina, it really helps us with our relationship with God the Father. And so I think that's one of the tragedies of our times, that a lot of children, young people, even adults, I mean, the evil one has really made us feel like we're orphans, that we don't have a father in heaven, that we can't count on a father, that God is not our father, that he doesn't care, or that he doesn't exist, or his truth doesn't matter. And yet, I mean, this is what God established, the family to show us how his love is, what his love is. And you are living that every day.
Yeah. The clock is ticking. I wondered if we could maybe ask both of you, if you had two pearls of wisdom to offer parents today, what would those pearls be? Nina, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think that one of the biggest things is to remember this, that we're parenting for eternity and our goal is heaven. So if you can keep that in mind, that your goal is heaven, and as a parent, your job on earth is to help to bring your children to heaven one day, that can undertone everything else. Just puts everything into perspective. The goal is not top-notch college or letters before their name or after their name. The goal is to help each other and our children to get to heaven. And then
one thing that I would say is that, in going along with that the Lord entrusts the children to us. He entrusts these children to us, and that we do our best and we cooperate with God's grace the best we can. But we know ultimately that they're his, that they have their own wills, that we will form them the best that we can. But that ultimately we have to give them back to God and say, I've seen that in my time in ministry. Sometimes a parent will even say that verbally. They'll say, I'm giving him back to God. They'll say it in front of the Eucharist and adoration. Maybe, I gave my child back to God, and that made all the difference, because I stopped trying to hold on so tightly.
Well, this is great. Nina, it's very evident to me why Mark wanted you to join him. Thanks for being with us, and would you be willing to come back again at some point in the future to expand on some of these ideas?
Sure, yeah,
of course.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Well, God bless your family and your work, and we'll be praying for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah,
it's our pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, see you again. Bye-bye.
We are grateful that you joined us today for another episode of the Mission Revive podcast. We humbly ask for your prayers as we continue in the mission entrusted to us to evangelize and revive hearts with Jesus. We would also ask that you prayerfully consider becoming a sponsor of this podcast or making a financial contribution to support this growing ministry. You can do this by visiting our website at revivehopeandhealing.com or through our Revive Hope and Healing Ministries patron page. We cannot do this without you. Thank you.